Everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I got another interview for you today. This was a really fun one. I got to sit down with author Jen Braaksma, and this was really cool because Jen is also a book coach, which is something I was completely unaware of. And as soon as she started explaining what it is, it makes total sense, especially for a writer with a teaching background. But Jen's going to go into detail on that. She goes into detail about her newest book, Evangeline's Heaven, and I hope I said that name right because I was getting her character name wrong. But really fun conversation. We go a little bit more than half an hour that we usually aim for, but I could have kept her on the line for like 3 hours because it was just so interesting picking her brain and getting into her writing process and how she made it happen. And she's also very forthcoming with kind of her beginnings and a couple missteps to, no fault of her own, just the learning curve of writing, which for anyone out there who is a creative or an aspiring creative or a writer on your own regard, this interview is very good, very inspiring, full of information. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Jen Braaksma to talk about her new book, Evangeline's Heaven. How you doing, Jen?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for bearing with the technical glitches, and we had a little bit of setup trouble.
Story of my life. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you've probably been doing a lot of these, right?
Yeah, it's great to get to meet so many new people this way.
Is this your first book?
It is. It's the first book that's actually been published. Most definitely
Right.
not the first book written, that's for sure.
That's actually something I wanted to ask because I know a lot of people, I'm sure you did it, I did it. People, when they want to get into writing, they're so excited about their first idea and they write it and they think it's amazing. And then you like take a step back and reread it and you're like, I could do better.
Yeah, absolutely. But in fact, I had a little bit of encouragement with the first novel that I wrote. It was also a young adult novel. It was a murder mystery, and it was a retelling of Shakespeare's Macbeth. So I thought I
Okay.
had this in the bag. And, I worked at it. I thought I did everything great. And I actually landed a literary agent. So, first
Wow.
novel, I get the agent, like, this is it, big time. Here I come. And then the agent couldn't place it with a publisher. And I was really surprised because I just assumed in my naivety that, of course, you get an agent, you get a publisher, you get that big book deal, and you go on to fame and fortune, and you never have to work another day in your life.
Right.
Okay, maybe not to that extent, but nonetheless, I was really surprised. But she wasn't able to place, and I thought, oh, the next one, and then the next one, and then I went back and I wrote a couple of more, and I learned more, and I kept improving my craft, and I hired editor and book coach, and like I'm doing everything right. So yeah, it was a lot longer of a process than when I got that first agent on that first book, thinking I had it made. I had so much to learn.
Yeah, that is impressive though to get an agent to even look at your first book, let alone sign on with you.
It
And
was a great experience, and it was a fantastic high, which is really nice, in nostalgia, but also a good reminder that yeah, there's a lot more to writing than just that. And so that's when I refocused on my craft and like, you know what, I'm gonna write another story or another one or another one. Just keep writing until I find the one that's the right one to get out there. And yeah, now it's about finding the readers and connecting
yeah,
with
that's
them.
awesome. I'm also surprised your first one didn't go because young adult is obviously a hot genre, and you stuck with it, so that's good. But also, murder mystery is like one of the hottest genres, so it's so weird that the two meshing didn't do it.
Well, I wonder, I think there's the part of that too. I have gone back and looked at it since. And as much as I appreciated what the agent said, maybe there was a reason the publishers didn't pick it up. So it's definitely on my to-do list to go back and see, now that I know what I know now,
Yeah,
maybe I'll go back and pick that up and say, yeah, maybe I can improve this. And you're right, YA, murder mystery. Yeah, we'll see. But for now, I'll stick with fantasy and angels and demons and heaven and Lucifer and all the rest of that.
there you go. How many stories were in between your first and your current?
I wrote three before this one. So two of which I'm happy to relook at, maybe tinker with and see if I could actually get them out into the world again. One will never see the light of day. That one was most definitely, it was my second one. After my first one, I thought I had this down pat, of course. And I'm like, okay, the first one didn't work. I'll just write a second one. And the second one, it was it was one of those where I wrote 300 pages thinking I knew what I was doing because I'd already written one. And I got to the very last scene and I couldn't figure out an end to the whole climax because it turned out that the beginning made zero sense. I had like this nuclear war going on, and like it just nothing at the beginning would have made sense for my protagonist to go on her quest. So it was so utterly ridiculous. I just had to say, okay, we're done with that one and move on to the next one. It's about cutting your losses.
Yeah, that sounds like a little bit more than you kind of painted yourself into a corner, because I'm sure the endings are. I would imagine if you ask a lot of writers, that's the hardest part. Like, how do you tie it off and have it be satisfactory but not drag on forever?
Right. And that's why so when I moved on to the next one, I discovered a book coach. I didn't even know such things existed, where my book coach was actually helping me not just with the editing at the end, but she was helping me figure out the outline process, what the story was, help me with brainstorming, and of course, like more importantly, the encouragement, because you know it's such a long slog and it feels almost impossible sometimes. Um, and to the point that in fact I loved what she helped me with so much that that's what I trained to do, and now that's what I do as part of my job as a book coach. So really I learned my lesson with that right to the end and not know what I'm doing. So now even with all of my clients I really work hard on a form of an outline, only a few pages. It's not putting every point down so that I don't have that problem again.
What are your outlines? I mean, I don't want you to give away your whole coaching business here because people might want to contact you, but could you go into some detail about like what your out is? It just act one, act two, act three, or do you
Yeah.
have that like inciting incident and those common things?
Yeah, so I have all of that too, and my version is based on Jenny Nash is my book coach, founder of Author Accelerator, and she's the one that developed what she calls the inside outline, and I've adapted it from there. And so, in only 2 or 3 pages, what she suggested and what I now do with my clients. So every scene is just a summary for 1 or 2 lines. Here's what's happening, but underneath that there's a point, there's the why that's happening, because story, as you know, it's not just about what the action is, it's why it's important to the character, why it's important to the protagonist, what in fact is going on. So that's a way to, so we have the external story arc in only 2 or 3 pages. It's the skeleton of your story, it's really the foundation. So we have the story arc of the what, but we also have the internal character arc, the why, so that we can see how the character evolves and changes in only 2 or 3 pages. You're not going to get every scene in this small outline, but it's enough that you see the skeleton, so you know where there's an ending or whether there isn't. And that's been extraordinarily helpful to me in the other books that I've worked on since Evangeline's Heaven, and what I use with my clients too. A way to kind of keep it all in your head.
Yeah, that's good. Do you find that outline is kind of a living document? Like as you write, are you one of the kind of writers that the story is kind of unfolding to you as well? So your outline has to kind of adapt with the changes you make?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when Jenny first suggested I work on this outline, like, yeah, sorry, no, I'm a pantser. I'm just going to do this. But of course, my experience didn't work out so well before. So when I kind of got the concept, no, it is a living document. Absolutely, it can change. And even Evangeline's Heaven, and the other books I've worked on since then, what I wrote from my first draft of the outline isn't exactly what the final version looks like, but that's okay. It gives me a starting point, and then I can reevaluate as I go. So like I'm halfway through, I don't know, this is what I had in my outline, but I don't really like it because my characters kind of surprised me by doing this. And then but what the outline does, and because it's a working document and I know I can change it at any point, it forces me to consider why I'm changing it, not just heading down the garden path on the story idea because hey, that's cool, look, a butterfly, let me follow that. It forces me to think about why am I changing it, and by using my cognitive side of my brain as opposed to just the emotional, like gee, that sounds nice, I can keep on track a little bit better and save myself some time and some editing too, rather than seeing where I've gone off the garden path.
Right. If you do that kind of wing it first draft, your first draft is a 300-page outline.
Right. And that works for some people. I'm a big believer. I know what process works for me. This is what I suggest to my clients. It absolutely helps them, but I am in no way advocating my way is the only way.
Mhm.
You have to find the process that works for you. for me, it was trial and error. As a book coach, I kind of like to help writers avoid those pitfalls.
Right.
So I just give them, hey, here's what worked for me. Here's why it worked for me. And then, yeah, you have to find it for yourself. So, if there are writers out there where, yeah, just write a 300-page outline and then fill it in with prose later, great. If that works for you, that works for you. My experience didn't work for me, doesn't work for most of my clients, but, it really is a very personal kind of journey.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. One thing you said about your outline that I really liked was don't just say what happens in the scene, but why it's happening. I think that's really interesting because I was listening to something. I don't remember if it was Mike Schur or Greg Daniels, both big TV writers, The Office, The Good Place, all those things. But they said if you tell a story, this happens and then, and then, and then, it's a bad story. If this happens because this happens because, then it's a good story. So I thought it was interesting that you have that in your outline.
Yeah, absolutely. Cause and effect is so important. We use that all the time because this happened, then that happened. Otherwise, it feels pretty coincidental, like
Mhm.
convenient. Really, really, you got your character over into the parking lot just as the love of her life happens to be getting out of the car. That seems kind of strange. So, absolutely, that cause and effect is important. And when it comes to the why, too, so Lisa Cron is another story coach, and she came up with this brilliant idea, which again I've adapted and works for me. It's this concept of a character's internal desire and a character's misbelief. So they really want something emotional on the inside. If you take Harry Potter, you think the story is about him going to a wizarding school, but it's more than that. It's that his internal desire is he really wants a family, and then his misbelief. There's something often in character in our childhood or youth, there's something that got us thinking, oh, this is the way it is, when of course it's not true. So in Harry's case, his misbelief would be he can never have a family. His parents are dead. His aunt and uncle don't like him. He gets bullied by his cousin. So the idea of a story is the plot comes along and challenges that misbelief. All this action, the what happens, the sequence of events pushes the character to confront that misbelief. And that's the internal arc. And it's not obvious, it's not meant to be. It's all woven in the thread that weaves the story together, but it's so important to understand what that is. So by the end of it, your character would have this aha moment. In Harry's case, it's when he realizes in order to defeat the big bad Voldemort, he needs to rely on his friends. He does have a family, it's just not necessarily blood related. Ron, Hermione, Neville, Dumbledore, Snape, you could argue too. So it's that concept. So that's the concept that I work with when I write my own stories, when I help my clients, so that I can keep that cause and effect, not just from action to action, but how the character evolves too.
That's awesome. That's really well put.
Thanks.
So you found this book coach, and then moving forward, it was kind of like a whole new world for you as you got to Evangeline's Heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked with Jenny on a novel before this one, and learning the ropes, learning the process. I've never been a good DIY kind of person, so I was always looking for help in how to write. And a course here, a webinar there. It was great, but it wasn't exactly what I needed. I really needed that one-on-one, and so that's what Jenny, as my book coach, provided me. And then she worked with me on Evangeline's Heaven, and at the time, she was starting up a training program for book coaches. I'm also a high school English teacher, so it just was a really good fit. I've been working with students for years, almost 2 decades, in the classroom, and I love stories. I love books, of course. So it was just such a great timing that she was coming up with this training course to combine my interest in teaching and coaching with my own writing, and that's why I think that I can do a good job as a coach because I am a writer too. I understand it. I know their frustrations. I've lived it. I've been there. I've worked as a writer with a coach. I've worked as a writer without a coach. So when I'm coaching my clients, like, oh my God, yeah, I get it. I understand. It's hard and it's frustrating. And I think that's something that we often forget. Like, I will sit down and I will watch a movie or a TV show, and because that isn't my field, I can just sit back and enjoy it and, like, wow, that was really cool. Or maybe I see something I want to pick apart. I'm like, huh, really? Why would they do that? But my goodness, you look at the credits, right? Like the number of people hours that goes into creating a movie or a TV series, it's astronomical. So to think that all of those people and all of those hours, and it's just me and my book here, of course I'm not going to know everything. So of course I'm going to need help. So it's easy for me to sit there and comment on a movie or TV show, but I don't see all the work and effort behind it. Just like anybody can pick up a book and like it and or not, but if you pick up a book and you think, yeah, I can write it because it's easy to read, it's not. And a lot of
Mhm.
writers forget that it's hard. It's a challenge. There's a lot of work involved. That's not a bad thing, but it's a lot of writers feel bad, like, oh, geez, it's not coming together for me. I must be terrible. Well, no, it really is a challenge, and it's okay to not know and to learn the skills and then to move on and improve, just like any other skill. So yeah, since I've been there, done that, I'm able to help or at least like to think that I can help my clients get through that emotional aspect of writing too.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it kind of sounds like going back to the beginning, your first book that you thought was going to go and it didn't. Looking at what you're doing now, it seems like almost a blessing in disguise. Where if the first one did blow up right away, you might have just been like, I have nothing left to learn. Like, I can do this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was really, crushing when the agent comes
Yeah.
back and says, "Yeah, sorry, I can't place it. We're done." I'm like, but,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But I've always been the kind of person, like, I'm self-reflective, if you will, looking, okay, what is it that I can do better? Where is it that I can improve? And appreciating that it's a fine balance between, oh my God, it's rejection sucks. Rejection hurts. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the game or what you're doing. It's just, of course, it's not personal to the agent or the publisher, and I get that. It just feels personal. So I had to balance that off with, okay, but maybe they're trying to tell me something else. And that's exactly to your point. Yeah, I was able to learn a lot, and obviously, I'm still learning. I have a lot to learn. I'm not saying I know everything about the craft of writing. I still think there's lots that I can learn. And I most definitely am just starting this learning curve about the publishing business, about marketing, about connecting with readers. That's all learning curve for me. That's all new. So yeah, definitely lots to learn. It's a good thing I have a whole bunch of years ahead of me.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. We're talking all about outlining and starting your writing. We didn't even really go deep on writing the actual book, and then you have this whole other world of the marketing it, which, in my limited experience, that is infinitely harder than creating the book.
So same with my limited experience. I've written books. My God, I'd rather sit down and write another one. Absolutely. And I think in part because it's just such a different skill set, right? When I set out to write, I had a story to tell and I really wanted to tell it. And so that's kind of where it is. I'm like, I don't know how to do anything else. Um, so it was a mindset, right? Like I don't want to be a marketer. I don't want to, be out there on social media. I don't want to figure all of this out until I realized that the reason why I wrote the book in the first place is because I want to connect with readers. I like my story. I think it's good. I think that other people will like it too. So there's no point in me going through all of this because I want to connect with readers. There's no point in just having to sit on my computer or a
Mhm.
stack of paper on my desk. If I really truly want to, it's the other half of the game. And okay, just like I learned the first half, now I'm going to learn the second half. And yeah, I'm going to either make mistakes or mess it up, or maybe not take opportunities where I should have, or things like that. But it's that learning curve. So to me, the end game of being able to connect with my readers is kind of worth that secondary struggle, even though I never really appreciated that that's what I would have to do when I first set pen to paper.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like if you knew about the marketing side of it before you started, maybe you wouldn't have started.
Well, I have a story about that because when I started working with Jenny as my book coach, one of the things that she suggests is, especially if you're interested in publishing that's not just for you. Like if you want either traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, or self-publishing with the intent of getting it out there into the world, not just your friends or family. So she suggested, let's talk about a marketing plan right at the beginning before I'd even started my outline. And I just freaked out. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. How am I supposed to? I don't have anything to write. I don't know what I'm writing. And so of course she's listening to me and she said, you know what, you're right. For you, this isn't the right step. So let's focus on the book first. And for some people, they appreciate that, okay, I have this target audience, I have this idea of a marketing plan. So this is giving me a really good sense of how to go on. That wasn't working for me. So we just reversed it, and that's what helps. So a lot of writers feel like, oh my god, how am I supposed to do it all? My From what I've learned, hard knocks life experience as a writer here, is you don't have to do it all at once. Do one thing, and then it doesn't it feels overwhelming, but it doesn't have to if you step back one step at a time. So for me, it was first the outline, then the drafts, revisions, and now, okay, agents, publishers, what am I doing? So it was one step at a time, and that's what made it bearable. That's what made it doable.
That's also very, very good advice for people who are getting into it, because they might try to look at the whole picture and like, oh, do I do a book tour? It's like, well, you haven't written your first page yet, so slow
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, and it's easy to see because, if you use the analogy of building a house, you drive by a neighborhood where there's some gorgeous houses, or you're online, looking at real estate or whatever, like, wow, that's so beautiful. But you have to go back to the design, and then you have to go back to, dig the foundation, and then you have to go back and start to frame it. So what the process looks like when you're in the middle of framing a house is nothing like that beautiful picture that you've seen in a magazine or online, or driven by a beautiful neighborhood around you. So it's easy for writers to get caught up in, okay, but I want the walls in my house to be this color, when in fact you need walls
Right.
first. So it's not that their ideas are wrong. Of course, that's what they want. It's just a matter of reminding them, yeah, you know what, we'll get there. Let's just start with what we can first. And in my case, it was my character. I had this idea of Evangeline as as Lucifer's daughter. That's what I started with, and then I thought, okay, I'll deal with the rest later. It took me a long time to get to that point. I'm not saying it's easy, but
Yeah.
once I did, yeah, whew, life was so much easier.
Was that part of the your book coaching experience as well, as not just figuring out your character, but the kind of take all things in stride, and or not in stride, but take things as they come?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it's that emotional piece. I know a lot of writers that I work with, and very similar to me. I've wanted to be a writer. I was always writing since I was a kid. Always dabbling in it. Didn't choose to go into it in any kind of more professional way until much later. So it's easy to think like, oh my god, if it doesn't work out. But it was because it's what I determined I wanted to do with my career. I'm leaving teaching. I was teaching during the pandemic, and I thought, wow, I'm not sure this is for me. Even knowing we would finally get back to some kind of normal, or whatever that new normal would look like, I thought, you know what, this is my opportunity. This is my chance to dive in and change. And that's when I started book coaching full time, and I started writing. And because I wanted to make that as a long term shift, I couldn't possibly deal with every kind of overwhelming, all these steps that I needed to do. Because here I am, I'm now starting my own business. I'm going to be a solo entrepreneur as a book coach. How do I find clients? How do I market myself for that? Plus, how do I write? So, because I wanted it long term, I couldn't sustain that kind of nervous energy every day, not knowing. I had to start making a plan. So, and the only way I could do that, what worked best for me, was to break it down in those chunks and just focus one thing at a time. And because of that experience, that's what I recommend to my writers. That's what my coach recommended to me. Just take it one step at a time. You may know that expression, like, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, is that
Yeah.
concept. Just it's easy to let it overwhelm you. It's not easy to take a step back, but it's a worthwhile challenge to take on, so that you can keep going and you can finish.
That is all excellent advice. And yeah, um, this might be a little bit out of order, but what is your actual, like, when it's time, like your outline's good, you're going to sit down, you're going to write? Like, what is your process there? Because I always find that really interesting.
So when I was writing Evangeline's Heaven, I was still teaching full time. So I was just trying to fit in an hour here, an hour there. And it was when I was getting toward toward the end of that, when decided, okay, I'm going to take some time off teaching, and maybe this isn't it. What really helped me is to devote some time, like from this time to this time is going to be my writing time. I lock myself in my home office. And again, this was towards the end of the pandemic. So I have two teen daughters, and they were doing school virtually, not by choice, but because that's the way things were. My husband was working from home. So the whole family is here. And I don't know if it's just because I'm such an awfully nice person or because I'm the mom, but everyone would always come in no matter what I was doing. Everyone would come in and, hey, mom, what about this? Or, dear, how about this? And like, okay, I'm glad I'm at your service, but what am I getting any time to write? And so I got up the courage to tell them, no, no one is coming into my home office from this time to this time. You have homework questions, I'll answer them later. You want to know what we're having for dinner? We can talk about it afterwards, whatever the case was. And I really thought I was going to get pushback because they've been doing that for like months. It was just the norm. And they didn't. They were like, okay. I'm like, really? Wow, it was that easy. So I had to create some boundaries for myself. That was my key for writing. For when I write a draft of any novel now, it's set some boundaries, let everyone know, look, can you please not bother me? There's a downside to that too, because when you get stuck, when you're like, I don't know what next sentence to write, nobody's coming in to bug you.
Right. Yeah. Kind of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah. But it was
So,
those boundaries that really made a difference. Even when I was working full time, it's so hard to carve out time for writing. I know a lot of writers are in that position.
mhm.
So the same concept applies for me. I was able to get a couple of hours again after I left teaching, but you can still do that. I'm getting 10 minutes, and every day I'm getting 10 minutes, and it feels like you're not writing a lot. Sometimes the writing might not even be words on the page. I spend a lot of time thinking about what my next scene is going to be. So I'm like lying on the couch or on my bed or just like sitting in a chair in my living room, and it looks like I'm just zoning out or flaking off or whatever. And I'm not. I'm My brain is percolating what's the next step. For me, that blank page is really ominous. So I try never to get to that point where it's a blank page. I'll stop, go away from the blank page, think it through, and then come back and start typing. So 10 minutes of just reflecting what is it that I'm going to write next is still writing, even if it's only 10 minutes. So it's not easy. I know that. Especially there are lots of writers who have younger children, and demands on their time and their family responsibilities a lot different. But if you can carve out even those 10 minutes, even if you're not typing, you're thinking through your story, you're getting ahead. One word on the page or one thought in your head is one more than you had yesterday.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. When you are in your office, do you go like super deep, like your desk facing a blank wall, shut your phone off, no Wi-Fi on the laptop? Do you do all that, or you just kind of like try to stay focused
Good
and
heavens, no, I can't possibly do that. My my home office, it faces the front of our house so I can see our neighbors. So it's nice to know when they're coming and going and who's visiting them and who's driving by. And we have a lot of dog walkers. So I'll see who's yeah, are you kidding? Good heavens, no. Um I really need to probably shut off my Wi-Fi or something. It's really easy to kind of but you know what? Even if I did that, I have books all over the place, like stacked on my desk. Like my to read pile is like ridiculously high. So I'll just drift over and I'll pick up a book and I'll start. So I don't even need electronics. I don't even need technology. It's just a book can
the
distract
mind's gonna
me.
wander when it wants to wander?
Right, right. So how do I keep focused? Uh, a little bit of willpower and a reminder that I wanted to do this. So yeah, it's hard, and I don't really know where I'm going next. But I put myself into this situation, so I got to get myself out. It's really important for me to get this story on the page. I really want the world to meet Evangeline, so it's never going to happen unless I do it. And actually, that's something that also really helped me too. Is I'm the only one that can write my story.
Hmm.
Somebody else can come along with my exact idea, Lucifer's daughter, war in heaven, all the rest of it. And their story would be exactly, completely opposite, different, whatever. So the ideas in my head, I'm the only one that can get them onto the page. And that's pretty empowering to know that, no one else is in my head. So if I want that out there, I'm gonna have to do it. And that, yeah, that kind of helps keep me motivated when I'm picking up another book or going on to another tab, or looking at email or social media or whatever else I can find to distract myself.
Right. All right. Well, we've talked, process and how you got into it and all that, but we should probably talk about Evangeline's heaven. That's probably the fun part, right?
Well, it is now that all the hard work is done
Yeah,
on
you
the
put in the
writing
work.
and
So,
crafting of it. Yeah, absolutely.
so you kind of want to give, I guess, start with the elevator pitch and
Yeah, absolutely. So Evangeline's Heaven is about Lucifer's daughter, as we've mentioned a couple of times. She's in the battle of the heavens. It's right before Lucifer's fall. And she has to decide whose side she's on.
okay.
So a lot of stories that angels are often when they're on earth, or we know Lucifer as Satan or the devil. I was just really curious when I started thinking about these ideas. It kind of came with this good versus evil. We have this binary idea, and of course, nobody's all good, nobody's all evil. There's always a little bit of both. You hope that you're more good, at least for the people around you. You're doing the best you can. um, but I wondered, like, what if something like this evil, like, how did that evil get that way? But I didn't want it to be about Lucifer's story specifically, although I had to certainly work on my version of his backstory. But what if somebody really loved Lucifer? And in this case, I bantered around with different types of characters, but I really like the idea of the daughter. And so Lucifer, in my version, he's an excellent father. He loves his daughter. He cares for her. He protects her from the other stuff that he's starting to do. So there's this war, and she feels that they're on the right side of this. That she's a commoner, which is there's a hierarchy of angels. She's the lowest class of angels. And so the higher classes, there's discrimination and injustice. And so she feels she's on the right side until she needs to find her father. She overhears a plot against him by the archangels. And so she needs to find her father to warn him. And as she travels through the seven heavens, she starts to learn more and more about how other people see her father. And so then it's the question, this is an angel, a man, a father who loves her, and she loves him, but how can she condone what she's hearing? So it's, in it, we don't have Lucifer as our father, but we've all been in a situation as teens, as young people, where we start to recognize and realize that our parents are actually people. They're human. They're not perfect, and they may not know everything, and they may disappoint us. And how do we reconcile that, and who they want us to be with who we want to be? So the universal themes, I hope, are reflected in Evangeline's journey. It just happens to be a little bit more exaggerated with, her father, who will, of course, end up in hell based on the mythology and the lore.
speaking of the mythology and the lore, how did you like really study up on the lore to try to stay, I guess, true for a lack of better, because it's hard to say, it's over to interpretations. I'm not trying to get into anyone's religion, but just there's established characters in these stories. Like I was thinking Lilith. I was like, oh, doesn't Satan have a daughter named Lilith? Does she come later? Like, did you go into all that, or just kind of your own version?
So yes, I absolutely did research on it because it is so much easier to research than to write. So this story has been percolating in my head for years, decades probably. And I would look up angels and lore. I actually focus more on angel lore than what Lucifer or hell or the devil. Because I'd always imagined it as the war before the fall. So what would happen to angels? And I found lists and lists of different angels and what their names mean and what their roles are and responsibility. And I have like a million different drafts. So ultimately, yes, I wanted Lucifer and angels, and my world building to have some familiarity, especially those who grew up in more Christian environments, or exposed to, familiar with some of the more Christian tropes of that. Um, So I wanted it to feel familiar, but that's why I love fiction. I didn't feel like I had to be married to any one of those ideas. I could play with them how I wanted. So it's a really great comment. Like I love retellings. I love mythology, fairy tales, all the rest of that, because you take what's common and then you can twist it around. So you get that familiarity. Oh, wow, that's cool. I recognize that. With, hey, that's a really neat idea. I never thought about it like that. So it's a bit of a combination of both. Yes, doing some research. No, not tying myself to any kind of lore or mythology specifically.
Yeah, that's a good balance, I feel, because if you look back at like I love the ancient Greek and Roman mythology, which is almost the same. But it was always kind of like culture mixed with religion, mixed with super. It was kind of all of it together. And if you look back at us right now in 2,000 years, it'll probably be largely the same. Where like the founding fathers might be mixed in with Christian mythology because that's what you know North America is based around. Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all what surprised me too. It was a really good lesson too, because I had some beta readers. I had some teen readers that I asked, hey, can you read a draft of this and let me know what you think? And some of my teen readers, they grew up in a different religion, ethnicity, home environment than what I did as a very white privileged Christian background that I have. And so some of them grew up in different religions, which means that they actually weren't familiar with the Christian mythology that I was basing this on, and they didn't know, oh, there was a war in heaven, and they didn't know this about angels in this way. And here I am thinking, like I was just talking about, oh, familiarity, commonality, yeah, of course. And it was a fantastic reminder, a little bit humbling, to recognize, maybe not everyone has your assumptions, Jen. So maybe you want to rein that in a little bit. So it is a balance. We don't know what people are gonna take out of it. What I'm hoping though, and these beta readers, that these teens that did read my story, they still like the story, even though they didn't have the same kind of grounding that I had imagined my readers to have. So I thought that I was able to do a good job. Even though they didn't know the mythology, they could still enjoy the story. And then for those who did, yeah, this is my take on it. And I hope you enjoy it. And if not, go and write your own story about Lucifer's daughter or son or whatever. And I'd love to read that too, because it's all going to be different.
That's perfect. Yeah. Well, I know we're a little over the time that I said, but I appreciate you hanging in there because it was very, very interesting. I'm sure anyone who's listening who writes or has an aspiration to write got a lot of good stuff out of this. Sorry if we didn't focus on your book specifically enough.
No, not at all. I love what I do as a book coach. I love helping writers. I love what I do as a writer, writing my own stories. They're really so intertwined that yeah, I can talk about one or the other all day. It doesn't matter to me.
The question that you probably hate as a writer who finally has a novel going out there in the world: is there a follow up in the works for?
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I love that question. Yeah, I'm actually just getting started on a sequel to Evangeline's Heaven. So,
Excellent.
yeah, so I'm excited. I have a trilogy planned.
Okay.
No, let me rephrase. I have a trilogy, um, broad concepts in mind, planning a little bit too much. I
That
know
comes
the
next.
basic idea of what I want, and I'm excited to start drilling down. And yeah, definitely really excited to work on the sequel, because I've written another book in the meantime. It's an adult literary fantasy about fairy tales, about Greek goddesses. So it was a different world to create, and I loved it. And it was a great break. But now, especially with Evangeline's Heaven coming out, I'm back in her world. So I'm really looking forward to jumping back into the sequel so I can start reliving in that world again.
Very cool. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find not only Evangeline's Heaven and when, but where they can find you, your book coaching, anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book comes out August 30th, and it's available, big websites like Amazon. I'm here in Canada, so Chapters Indigo. But you can get all the details at my website, jenbraaksmawriter.com. Links to various places to buy the book as well. And you can also get to my book coaching website from there. So my email's there too. If you want to contact me directly, go to that website. And if you have questions about my book, about coaching, about anything at all, you can just drop me a line directly there too.
That's amazing, Jen. Well, congratulations. I hope the launch goes well. Keep
Great.
us in mind for when you're ready with the sequel. We can talk about that then. And I hope everything goes well for you.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love to. Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
I'd like to thank Jen Braaksma one more time for coming on the show to talk to us about her writing process, teaching, coaching, sticking with it, and of course, Evangeline's Heaven, available August 30th. Check the links in the show notes. Really cool stuff. I could have talked to her forever about writing. It was fascinating and very inspiring. Please make sure you like and subscribe. We got a lot more interviews, new movie coverage, comic reviews, Amazon screeners, all the stuff you love and more coming your way. You're not going to want to miss out. Like, bell, subscribe, notifications, all the things. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing your feedback, so drop some in the comments, leave us something on social media. All the accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows, audio and video. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series. It's called Social Studies. It's a slice of life, kind of coming of age comedy comic about a group of friends going through high school and figuring out what everything's about, figuring out who they are, figuring out who they want to be. We have a ton of fun doing it. It's done in the style of the Nicktoons, 90s cartoons that we grew up on and inspired us. You can find all that and more at socialstudiescomic.com and on Comixology. Thanks.